You could smell the earth in Pine Hollow. It clung to everything. Your shoes, your fingernails, even your hope. I was born and raised in that sleepy farming town in northern Missouri, where life moved slower than the seasons. We didn't have much, but we had each other. At least that's what I believed back then. I was the second of 5 kids, and the only one who dared to dream beyond the cornfields and cattle. I wanted to be a teacher. Not just any teacher, but the kind that lit fires in small minds, the kind that gave children like me a reason to believe they could be more than their zip code. But life has a cruel way of testing your convictions. I still remember the day my father collapsed in the barn, clutching his side, sweat pouring off his face. The doctors said it was liver failure. No insurance, no savings, just the crushing reality that someone had to step up. So I did. I was 17. I dropped out of school and took the first opportunity that came my way. A distant cousin of my mother's offered me work as a live-in housekeeper for a wealthy family in the suburbs of St. Louis. It felt like I was trading dirt roads for marble floors. And for a while, that was enough to keep my guilt at bay. When I arrived at the Mercer residence, I didn't know where to look first. The home was enormous. White columns, manicured hedges, and more glass than I'd ever seen in one place. The front door alone was taller than any wall in our house back home. But what struck me most wasn't the luxury. It was the silence. The kind of silence that money buys. The kind that makes you feel like you don't belong. Mrs. Evelyn Mercer was sharp and distant. She gave instructions the way surgeons make incisions, precisely and without emotion. Her husband, Charles Mercer, was rarely home, always at court or out of town, according to the cook. Their daughter, Lily, was 6, wide-eyed, lonely, and instantly glued to me. That first week, I did everything with the kind of desperation only the poor understand. I scrubbed tile with aching hands, ironed shirts until my arms went numb, and smiled even when I wanted to cry. And every night, I'd stare at the ceiling in the cramped room in the servants' wing and whisper to myself, "This isn't forever. You'll find your way back." But forever has a way of sneaking up on you when you're too busy surviving. One morning, while trimming hedges outside the kitchen window, I caught a glimpse of Mr. Mercer arriving home. Not in a suit, not with a briefcase, but in jogging clothes, hair tousled, smiling like a man who'd forgotten the weight of the world. I greeted him politely, not thinking much of it. But when he paused, looked me in the eye, and returned my smile, just a little too long, it startled me. Not because it was inappropriate, but because it was the first time in months someone looked at me like I was more than a utility. It was the first time someone saw me. Looking back, maybe that's where the story truly begins. Not in Pine Hollow, not even in St. Louis, but in that one moment when a broken girl felt visible. Of course, I didn't know then how dangerous it was to be seen by someone like Charles Mercer. I didn't know how attention could become affection, and affection could become ruin. I was just a girl trying to hold her family together from 3 hours away, burying her dreams beneath obligation and fatigue. But hearts don't follow logic, and neither did mine. If someone had told me that a man like Charles Mercer could ever notice a girl like me, I would have laughed it off, politely, humbly. But life has its own way of unfolding, not with grand fireworks, but with quiet glances and moments so subtle you barely notice you're slipping. At first, it was innocent. He'd come home from a run or a trip to court, loosen his tie, and offer a tired but gentle, "Good evening, Hannah." I'd nod and smile, hands still wet from dishwater, my cheeks hot, though I didn't understand why. He started lingering a bit longer in the kitchen. He'd ask how my day was, whether my mother was feeling better, or how the crops were doing back in Pine Hollow. No one had ever asked about my life with that kind of genuine curiosity. And when someone like him, a man with polished shoes and a Harvard law degree, asks a girl like me about goat births and drought, something strange stirs in the chest. You feel important. I was careful at first. But then came that rainy Thursday. Mrs. Mercer had left early that morning for a conference in Chicago. Lily was at school. The whole house was unusually still. I had been cleaning the study, dusting around law books I couldn't pronounce, when I heard his voice behind me. "You always keep it this neat?" he asked with a chuckle. I spun around, nearly knocking over a lamp. I didn't hear you come in." He smiled, walked over, and leaned against the desk like we were just two people having a casual chat. "You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago," he said softly. "She used to hum when she worked too." I hadn't realized I was humming. He stayed longer that day. We talked about books, about small-town life, about how he never really felt like he belonged in high society. He said he envied people who still remembered where they came from. "It keeps you grounded," he said, eyes fixed on mine. I wanted to believe it was nothing. But little things started piling up. He'd join Lily and me during snack time, sitting across the table, listening to her laugh and to my silly stories. Sometimes he'd bring home chocolates and say, "Got a few extra, thought you might like some." One night, Lily had trouble sleeping. Mrs. Mercer was out of town again. Charles knocked on my door, something he'd never done before, and asked me to read Lily a bedtime story. I agreed, of course. But when I walked into her room, he followed and sat beside us. Halfway through the story, his hand grazed mine as he reached to adjust Lily's blanket. I froze. So did he. Our eyes met, and in that quiet, child-filled room, something shifted. From then on, avoidance became my daily routine. I avoided eye contact. I made excuses not to be in the same room. I turned down small talk, but his presence became harder to ignore. His compliments came more often. "You have a calming way with Lily," he'd say. "You make this house warmer." It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was temptation, and that's a different kind of danger. The worst part? I liked how he made me feel. I hated myself for it. I tried to pour myself into work, scrubbing deeper, folding faster, always rushing out of rooms before things lingered too long. But the more I tried to pull away, the closer he came. One evening, thunder shook the windows. I was sitting alone in the kitchen, staring into my tea, thinking of home. My youngest brother had sent a letter saying Mom's health was getting worse. I felt useless, miles away, scrubbing someone else's floors, barely able to send enough money home for medicine. Charles walked in. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, setting down a second mug of tea. He sat across from me, elbows on the table, watching me carefully. "You okay?" I don't know what possessed me to speak. Maybe it was the storm, maybe it was the loneliness. But I told him about my guilt, about leaving my family, about feeling like a failure even though I was working 12-hour days. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, and for a moment, I let myself believe he truly saw me. Then he reached across the table and gently took my hand. My body stiffened. "I think you're extraordinary," he said. "You don't even see it." I pulled my hand away, not abruptly, but firm enough to make a point. "I should go to bed," I said, standing quickly. "Hannah," he called as I reached the stairs. I turned halfway. "I know what you're thinking," he said. "But I'm not the man you think I am. I don't play games." That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling again, just like I used to. But this time the whisper in my head wasn't "this isn't forever." It was "you're already falling." Some choices don't feel like choices when you're in the middle of them. They feel like gravity. Like the inevitable pull of something you've tried too long to resist. That's what it felt like the night I let Charles Mercer kiss me. It had been weeks since that stormy evening in the kitchen. The one where he held my hand and called me extraordinary. Since then, everything had become sharper, more electric. His presence made my skin hum. The air between us felt charged, no matter how much I tried to pretend otherwise. But I kept pretending, until the night his wife didn't come home. Mrs. Mercer had flown out to Denver for a business conference. Lily had a stomach bug and refused to sleep without someone in the room. I sat by her bedside, reading Goodnight Moon in a soft voice, stroking her hair until she drifted off. Just as I was about to leave, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Charles stood there in the doorway, watching us. "She never lets Evelyn sit that close when she's sick," he said quietly, like it was some confession. "But she always reaches for you." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I adjusted the blanket, tucked Lily in a little tighter, and moved to leave. But he didn't move. "Stay for a minute?" he asked, his voice low. I hesitated. "I made coffee," he added. Stupidly, I followed him to the kitchen. And for the next 30 minutes, we sat like two old friends, talking about nothing and everything. He told me about his first job out of law school, about how Lily once hid his court shoes in the freezer. I told him about the goat on our family farm that used to headbutt the back door when it wanted attention. We laughed. It felt too easy. And then he reached out, brushed a hair from my cheek. "You should hear your laugh more often," he whispered. That's when I should have left. That's when I should have stood up and walked back to the servants' wing, locked my door, and prayed for the strength to forget what I felt. But I didn't. Because the next second, his lips were on mine. It wasn't rough or hurried. It was slow, careful, like he'd been waiting for months to memorize the shape of me. And I let him. I told myself it would be just that moment, just that kiss. A foolish slip in a weak moment. But one moment became two. Two became three. By the end of that week, we were sneaking moments in empty hallways, sharing glances across the dining room, whispering in the pantry like reckless teenagers. It was thrilling, addictive, and completely wrong. I hated myself for every second I craved him. He wasn't mine. He never would be. But when he held me, it felt like the only place I belonged. When he touched my face, I forgot I was the help. I forgot I was a daughter trying to hold her family together from 3 counties away. I forgot everything except how he made me feel seen, chosen, wanted. Lily grew more attached, too. She'd crawl into my lap, ask me to brush her hair, beg me to tuck her in, even when her mother was home. I knew it confused her. I was the housekeeper, but I was also the one who showed up when she cried. One night, while I read her a bedtime story, Charles sat beside me like usual. Lily looked up and said, "I wish you were my mommy." My heart stopped. He looked at me then, not with guilt, not even with surprise, but with something terrifying. Hope. "I wish that too," he whispered. That should have been the end. That should have been the moment I packed my bags and left. But instead, I stayed. I stayed because part of me wanted to believe we could make it right. That he would leave Evelyn. That I could step into that life without shame. Of course, none of that was real. I was the secret. The escape. The thrill behind a closed door. But I didn't realize how much I'd lost myself until I started dreaming about a life that wasn't mine to have. We met late at night when Evelyn was traveling. We shared wine in the kitchen, kisses in the hallway, laughter over Lily's drawings. I told myself lies, dangerous ones. That love was more important than vows, that being chosen made me worthy. And the worst part? I started to believe I belonged there, in that house, at that table, next to him. Even when Evelyn walked past me like I was invisible. Even when guilt ate through me like acid every night. Even when I could no longer look in the mirror without shame. I was falling, fast, and without a parachute. And I had no idea how close we were to the ground. I always thought secrets dissolved quietly, fading like fog when the sun rises. But when the truth finally found us, it didn't whisper. It exploded. It was a Saturday night, one of those rare times when the house felt almost peaceful. Lily had gone to bed early after spending the afternoon playing in the yard. Mrs. Mercer had called earlier, saying she'd be staying overnight in Chicago due to a delayed flight. I should have taken that as a cue to keep my distance. Instead, I let myself drift again. Charles and I sat on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, the soft hum of cicadas filling the silence. He leaned his head on my shoulder, like we had done this 100 times before. Like we were something real. "I wish we didn't have to hide," he said. "We always have to hide," I replied. "That's what this is, Charles. Hidden." He didn't like that. He pulled away just enough to look at me. "It doesn't feel hidden when I'm with you. It feels like home." And then he kissed me. That kiss should have tasted sweet, but it didn't. It tasted like danger, like desperation, like every rule I was breaking bleeding through my skin. We didn't hear the front door open. We didn't hear the heels clicking across the marble floor. We didn't hear the rustle of an overnight bag being dropped by the stairs, but we heard her voice. "What the hell is this?" We froze. Charles stood first, the blanket slipping from his shoulders. I scrambled to my feet, my heart slamming against my ribs. Evelyn Mercer stood under the porch light, eyes glassy with disbelief, her mouth curled into something between shock and rage. "I said," she repeated, voice trembling. "What is this?" Charles stepped toward her, hands raised slightly. "Evie, I can explain." No, don't insult me with that." She pointed at me. You? You? The help, Charles?" The words sliced through me. I tried to speak, to say anything that might defuse the bomb about to go off, but nothing came out. "I welcomed you into this home," she snapped at me. "I gave you work, a roof, food, and this is how you thank me?" Charles moved in front of me like a shield. "Don't do this. Don't turn this into..." "Turn this into what, Charles?" she barked. "An affair? A betrayal? The destruction of the only family we have left?" And that was when Lily appeared. She stood at the patio door, rubbing her eyes, clutching a stuffed animal. "Daddy?" Evelyn's entire body went rigid. I took a step back, the sight of the little girl tearing something inside me. She had no idea what was happening, no clue that the people she trusted most had broken something sacred in front of her. Charles rushed over and picked Lily up, whispering something into her ear. Evelyn just stood there, stunned, silent, watching the pieces of her life fall apart. "I think you should leave," she said to me coldly. "Evie," Charles started, but she cut him off with a look so sharp it could have drawn blood. "She doesn't belong here, not anymore, not near our daughter, not near me." Charles turned to me, eyes pleading. "Don't go, please!" But I could feel it. I wasn't supposed to be there anymore. I never was. I walked past them without a word, past the marble staircase, past the photos on the wall of their wedding, their vacations, their daughter's first day of preschool. I had inserted myself into a life that already had all the pieces it needed. And I was the crack in the glass. Before I could leave, Evelyn grabbed my wrist. "You may have fooled him, but not me," she hissed. "You'll never be more than what you were when you walked through that door. Don't think love makes you worthy." She let go, and I walked away with that sentence etched into my bones. I packed my things in silence. No tears, no drama, just numb fingers folding memories into a duffel bag. Charles came to my room before I left. He stood in the doorway, eyes red, jaw tight. "I love you, Hannah." I didn't respond. "I meant every word, every touch. You weren't a mistake." I looked at him, finally. "You have a daughter, a wife, a life I don't belong in. I'm not going to be the reason she grows up thinking love means betrayal." He took a step toward me. I stepped back. "You made your choice," I whispered. "I'm making mine." And then I walked past him, down the hall, out the door, into the night. I didn't cry when I left the Mercer estate. Not when I zipped up my bag. Not when I saw Charles's silhouette at the doorway. Not even when Lily peeked out from behind her mother, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes confused and afraid. But I cried the moment I reached the Greyhound station. It was 2:14 a.m. The lights flickered. The smell of diesel and old coffee hung in the air. I found the last seat on the far end of the bench and sank into it like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The duffel bag at my feet felt heavier than it should have. Heavier with shame, with loss, with the realization that I'd burned the bridge back to my old life and didn't yet have a path forward. I returned to Pine Hollow just as the leaves were starting to turn. It was colder than I remembered. The fields looked smaller. My childhood home, now missing a porch step and badly in need of paint, stood like a tired soldier, weathered but still standing. My mother was in the kitchen when I arrived. Her body had grown thinner, her face lined deeper than before. But when she saw me standing in that doorway, there was no judgment, just quiet recognition. "You're back," she said. "I'm sorry," I whispered. She didn't ask for an explanation. She simply opened her arms, and I walked into them like a child who'd run too far. Life at home was not glamorous. It was dirt under my fingernails again. Feeding chickens before sunrise. Taking shifts at the corner diner on weekends. Selling eggs and handmade soap at the farmer's market. I didn't tell anyone about Charles, about Evelyn, about Lily. I carried that story like a stone in my pocket, always with me, but never shown. At night, when everyone was asleep, I'd lie in bed and replay it all. The moments that felt real. The ones I knew were lies. The look on Evelyn's face. The weight of Lily's goodbye. The way Charles said "I love you" when he already had a family to love. Some nights, I hated him. Most nights, I hated myself. But hate was a heavy thing to carry. And eventually, it gave way to something quieter. Responsibility. It started with a flyer I saw at the local co-op. Vocational scholarships for rural women. It sounded too good to be true. But I applied anyway. I wrote the essay at the kitchen table, scratching out sentence after sentence, trying to explain why someone like me, someone who had made so many mistakes, still believed she could become a teacher. To my surprise, I was accepted. The program wasn't easy. I commuted 3 hours round trip, balancing classes with my job at the diner. But every time I sat in that classroom, notebook open, pen trembling in hand, I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself I had nearly thrown away. I wasn't trying to run from my past. I was building something in spite of it. My mother grew stronger, slowly. My siblings, once resentful of my absence, softened when they saw the new version of me. The quieter one, the one who didn't speak in apologies, but in action. And then one day, out of nowhere, something remarkable happened. I met someone. His name was Marcus. He taught automotive repair at the same vocational center. He was kind in the way most men forget to be, never pushy, always listening. He had a crooked smile, a calm presence, and the patience of someone who had made peace with his own brokenness. We started with casual coffee between classes, then study sessions, then dinners after evening lectures. He never asked about my past, but when I told him, on a rainy night not unlike the one where everything changed with Charles, he didn't flinch. "You're not your worst decision," he said, placing his hand gently over mine. "You're the woman who walked away from it." I didn't know I could still be seen that way. Months turned into a year. I finished my program, earned my certification, got a job as a teaching aide at the elementary school just outside town. It wasn't glamorous, but every time I stepped into that classroom, I knew I was exactly where I belonged. One morning, a student came up to me after class. A shy little girl with freckles and hair like mine had been at that age. "You're the nicest teacher here," she said. "You talk like you mean it." I smiled, but inside, I broke a little. Because for the first time, I realized something. All the pain I'd carried, all the guilt, all the lost nights and whispered regrets, they hadn't been for nothing. They had carved out the space in me where empathy could live, where understanding could grow, where I could look a child in the eyes and say, "I see you," and actually mean it. By the time Marcus and I married, I had forgiven myself. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to build a life I didn't have to hide from. Enough to let love find me the right way, without secrets, without shame. And when our son was born, I held him to my chest and made a quiet promise that I would teach him what love really meant. Not desire, not escape, but sacrifice and honesty. The kind of love I had to lose everything to understand. It's funny how life has a way of circling back. How the very things that once broke you become the lessons that build you. Years have passed since I last saw Charles Mercer. I don't know where he is now. I've never tried to find out. Sometimes I wonder if Lily ever asks about me. If she remembers the stories I used to read, the way I brushed her hair before bed. But I've learned to let go of questions that have no answers. The past is not a home. It's a road we traveled, full of turns we can't take back. Today, my world looks very different. I teach second grade at a small school in Maple Glen, just outside our old farming town. It's not a place that makes the news, but it makes a difference. Every day, I step into my classroom and see pieces of my younger self in my students. Quiet girls with dreams too big for their zip code, boys who hide pain behind jokes, children who just want someone to believe in them. I show up for them, because no one should feel invisible. Marcus, my husband, is still the calm in my storm. He builds engines, I build minds. And together, we've built something neither of us thought we'd have. A simple, honest life. We have one son, Jonah, who just turned 5. He laughs like his father but stares at the world like me. Curious, cautious, full of wonder. Some days I catch myself watching him sleep, and I whisper a silent promise. You will never feel unloved. You will never be someone's secret. There's peace in knowing I became the woman I once thought I destroyed. Not perfect, but whole. There are still nights when I remember the pain, the shame, the moment Evelyn looked me in the eyes and called me a mistake. But I've stopped letting that memory define me. Because I am not the girl who crossed the line and ran away. I am the woman who walked through fire and came out teaching others how not to burn. Hannah Reid's journey reminds us that the worst mistake doesn't have to be the end of our story. It can be the beginning of something wiser, deeper, and more human. In moments of weakness, we may choose what feels comforting over what is right. But true strength is not found in perfection. It's found in accountability. Hannah chose to walk away not just from a man, but from a life built on lies, even though it broke her heart. She faced her shame, returned home, and rebuilt herself from the soil up. Her story teaches us that redemption doesn't require applause. It requires humility, consistency, and the courage to start small. Whether we are 30 or 70, it's never too late to make a better choice. And the love that grows from truth, however simple, will always outlast the one built on secrets. It's not about erasing the past. It's about not letting it define your future.